right, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at our ITIL webinar. My name is Eden, and I am on the marketing team at Sunset Learning. And also with me is David Cannon. David is the director of PeopleCert for the Americas. He has used ITIL as a practitioner, consultant, and business executive for 30 years. He's also led consulting practices in Hewlett-Packard, BMC Software, and Forrester Research. He is the author of 4 ITIL books, which you will get a little preview of at the end of this webinar. And we are very happy to have him here today. So now I'll hand it over to David to get started.
Thank you very much. And good morning, afternoon to everyone. Thank you to Sunset Learning Institute for having me here. I know some of the names on the attendees list. Very good to see you all again. I'm going to jump straight into it. Again, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. We'll have time for questions at the end of the session. But what we're going to be talking about today is looking at ITIL4 in 2024. What we want to do today is really just look at what are the benefits that organizations are getting from ITIL, and how do we make sure that we're continuing to get those benefits as we use ITIL into the future. So let's have a look at, oh, there I am. You can see me in real person as well, so don't worry about that. Let's jump straight into this. So I'm going to give you a summary of the whole presentation today, and here it is. So the first thing is that ITIL continues to help us to solve critical challenges facing organizations. It is still a fundamental building block for many organizations, and we're going to have a look at why that is. But it's also an important building block for our careers. Many of you on this call have been using ITIL for a number of years as part of a way of building your career, as have I. And I can tell you that it will continue to be an important building block for developing careers into the future. And we'll look at why that is. So how does it do this? Well, one of the reasons is because it's constantly updated. We're now in ITIL4, and even within ITIL4, we're seeing components of ITIL being updated as the industry changes, as new technology comes along, as it changes the way we work, as it changes the way in which we manage our organizations. The second thing that ITIL does is it ties together the disciplines and approaches used to manage technology. So all very well that we have this, this technology that we manage, and we have technical experts who are able to manage that technology as individual pieces of technology. But how do we bring all of that together? And how do we integrate that into the way in which our businesses work, in which our organizations work? ITIL really helps us to tie together all of those disciplines. It's also based on proven practices. Anything that you see in ITIL has been implemented somewhere, has worked somewhere. This is not just something that has been invented by a few very clever people who have come up with some amazing theory on how technology works and how it should be managed. ITIL is based on things that have really been done in real life. And we'll talk about that in a moment. And the other thing is that ITIL is independent. It is not developed by any individual consulting organization, outsourcing organization, or tool vendor. It actually includes input and participation from multiple sectors in the industry and from multiple stakeholders in the industry. So it is not representing a single point of view that is going to take you down a path that benefits some vendor or some big organization. Now, 3 things that we're going to look at. So that was the summary. That's what we're going to learn today. Just that ITIL is still relevant. It's still really useful, and it's going to continue to help us grow our careers and our organizations. But let's look at the agenda, and I'm going to show you how that works. The first one is how our organizations using ITIL, and I want to look at some of the benefits of ITIL. There has been a lot of talk in the industry about, ITIL has been around for a long time. Is it still relevant? Are people still getting value out of it? Isn't there something new that's come along? Well, I'm going to show you that even today, ITIL continues to bring just huge benefits to the organizations that use it. And what we start seeing is that the longer you use ITIL, the more benefits you start to get from it. So I'll show you exactly how that works. Then we're going to take a brief look at what is in ITIL. What is it about ITIL that helps us to achieve these benefits? And then finally, I'm going to bring this back to our own personal careers and how we can use ITIL to build our careers and boost our careers. So let's jump straight into that. First of all, how are organizations using ITIL? The next few slides are all based on a piece of research that was done by an organization called Research in Action, in which they interviewed 1,500 IT managers. And these are IT managers who have budget responsibility in enterprises around the world. So this is recent. This research was conducted in 2023. So it is very much up to date. I'm going to show you some of the results of that research. I'll go to the first slide, and there's just a few things I want to point out to you as we go through the slide. The first one is that you'll notice that the answers are grouped according to the maturity of the of ITIL use within that organization. So service management, how mature is service management in the organization? So you'll see some of the respondents said that their ITIL practices were in the initial stages, or they really hadn't done anything. So the organization was in the status quo as it existed in the moment. Then there were organizations who felt that their ITIL practices were performed and managed. In other words, they were doing them, but they weren't integrated. They'd been implemented or maybe started up. They were being managed, but they were not in an integrated framework within the organization. Then there were organizations that had well established and optimized. In other words, they hadn't just implemented them. They've been implemented, they've been integrated, they've been working over a number of years, and they've been optimized. And then finally, those organizations that were at the most mature, who felt that their practices were enabling them not only to sustain the organization, they were sustainable, but they were also able to include a level of growth and innovation. So very mature. And the answers varied according to what level of maturity these organizations were in. So if we have a look at, here's the most obvious one. This is one that you've probably heard about ITIL before. And that is that organizations use ITIL to save money. And that continues to be the case. 70% of organizations that have adopted ITIL have realized cost reductions of more than 10%. That's a significant cost reduction. What's interesting about this one is that you do not have to use ITIL to save money. You can actually save money without using ITIL, and then we see organizations doing that all the time. The question there is, when they saved money, what did they do? Did they simply cut staff? Did they discontinue some systems? It's easy to save money by doing those things. The problem when you start doing some of these things is that very often you're cutting away core capabilities. And you may actually be hurting the organization if you cut things that you didn't realize were pretty important. So as we go into performing and manage, we start looking at how organizations are cutting or reducing cost by focusing on areas that are wasteful or areas that are not contributing to business value. So we found, as we went through this research, that organizations were not only reducing cost, but they had a very high confidence that the things they were cutting were not critical to the business. In other words, they were not going to damage the way in which the organization worked as they cut through those costs. Notice that the highest percentage of cost comes with those who are implementing ITIL practices for the very first time. Well, that makes a lot of sense. If there is a lot of waste, we use ITIL practices to identify that waste and to eliminate it and to streamline our practices and processes, to integrate tools, for example. And we can certainly achieve a lot of cost savings for that. As we become more mature, there's less and less fat that we can cut away, and you can see that reflected here. But even so, even very mature organizations were still able to achieve cost reductions in the order of 16%. That was the average amount of costs that were saved by those organizations, which is pretty significant. So interestingly, again, you may hear, well, yes, ITIL may have been used to reduce cost in the past, but now we've cut all that cost out. It's not going to continue to help us cut costs. The evidence shows that, in fact, you are able to continue to achieve cost reductions. And that really comes through making very good decisions and avoiding bad decisions that are going to be costly and wasteful in the longer run. Okay. What else are organizations doing with ITIL? Well, here's another one that's related to our operational efficiency, and that is we improve ongoing business operation. So what we found is that 80% of organizations saw a reduction in service-related problems after adopting ITIL. And they did this, and by doing this, they enabled a more responsive and stable business focused on strategy and growth. In other words, what is happening is that we used ITIL to identify two things. One, areas that we can make more efficient, that we can stabilize. So, for example, we can look at a number of incidents that is happening frequently. We can look at what's causing those. We can eliminate that cause so that it doesn't happen again. That automatically then results in a more stable organization. But at the same time, we're looking for areas where we can support the strategy of the organization more effectively. So ITIL is looking at both those things. It's looking at how do we get better at doing the things that we do today, but it also looks for how can we use the capabilities that we have to grow into the future. And you see this happening very clearly. So we start seeing, well, if you don't do anything, yeah, you can probably eliminate some things. 9% of organizations were able to do that. They did that primarily by using a lot of firefighting, people running around trying to put out fires everywhere in the organization. But as we move towards more performed and managed, we start getting a better control of the environment that we're managing. But even more so as we establish and optimize those practices and get them working more consistently, we start seeing, yeah, we've got much better operational continuity. But the significant operational continuity and the significant identification of growth opportunities came as those practices became more innovative and sustainable, where we looked for areas of growth and areas to improve the organization overall. The third thing that organizations are doing with ITIL is improving the quality of IT services. We found that 73% of them achieved significant improvements in their service quality. So those organizations that really stuck, that started implementing ITIL practices and really stuck with them, really found that the more mature they got, the better the quality of services became. And this is for a number of reasons. One is because we get better at managing things the longer we stick to them. Right? So we get more experienced, we get better at identifying things that go wrong and how to fix them. But at the same time, we also get to understand our organization better. We're not only focusing on the technology we manage, but we're also focusing on the way in which that technology is being used by stakeholders in our organization and, of course, our external customers. The more we understand not only what our services are and how to manage them, but also how they're being used and how they're supporting the growth of the organization, the better the quality of those services become. And that's exactly what's happening over here. On the next slide, we see that the next thing that organizations are doing is they're using ITIL to improve speed and success of innovation. Now, that's an interesting one. I've often heard it said by people in the industry, oh, ITIL's great, but it's really just about operating your IT department. It doesn't focus on that really cool and exciting stuff. It doesn't look at the new technology. It doesn't look at artificial intelligence. It doesn't look at machine learning. It doesn't look at, well, absolute nonsense. What we're finding is that ITIL is actually core to many organizations' innovation and growth. In fact, 75% of organizations used ITIL so that they could adapt to changing market conditions, so that they could identify new strategic opportunities and figure out how to go after those opportunities. So we actually found that people who are focused on the status quo, their speed to innovation decreased. Why? Well, if you're primarily in firefighting mode, in other words, you're reacting to every change that comes along, then every new innovation that hits you is going to require a major reaction to figure out, what does this mean? How do we manage it? How do we fix it when it breaks? And everything just slows down because we have to learn those lessons every single time something new hits us. We don't have time to prepare for it. We don't have time to plan for it. Somebody in the organization has done it, but by the time it hits us, oh my goodness, it's just having to catch up all the time. So our speed of innovation actually slows down. However, as we start implementing ITIL, there's no real increase to the speed of innovation. We may be able to manage it more successfully, but we're still reacting to it. It's only when we become a little bit more mature in our practices where we start implementing them and using them almost as oxygen, the way that we breathe. So it's second nature to us. That's when we are able to start going after and proactively looking for, how do we support this new technology that's coming along? What does AI actually mean for the way we manage technology, the way our users are using technology, and the way in which our products and services are being built and delivered by our company? So we'll see this, the speed of innovation improved some. Interestingly, it's when we are at our most mature that the speed of innovation improved significantly. And why is that? Well, what we see here is that the mature organizations tend to focus on those ITIL practices that are more strategic. So you'll see that the less mature organizations, or organizations that scored themselves as less mature, are focusing primarily on things like, how do we resolve incidents? How do we make changes? Whereas organizations that view themselves as more mature have said, yeah, we've got that under control. We're now focusing on, how do we build our digital strategy? How do we manage not only the individual changes to systems, but changes to our business? How do we look at risk? Those are the kind of things that are happening at that top end over there. So what I'll show you a little bit later is, you're not only seeing a growth in the maturity of the same practices, but you'll see organizations, as they become more mature, start adding new practices and start becoming experts in new practices as they go. We'll talk about that a bit later. Something else that we're doing, we've got 3 more benefit slides, and then I want to get into the meat of this. But what we found is that 93% of organizations have been able to improve the way in which they work with partners. That's interesting. And it's significant for a very important reason. 20 years ago, yeah, sorry, there's this white beard over here, shows a lot of experience. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that experience. 20 years ago, in IT, when you had a supplier, it generally tended to be one or two, maybe five suppliers. They all supplied into IT, and then IT managed what was supplied and delivered it on into the business. Today, a lot of what IT departments used to do in the past is being done in three places. One is in the IT department. Sometimes a business unit will take some of that responsibility themselves. For example, we have a business unit that wants to use a customer relationship management or a Salesforce automation tool. They procure it from the cloud, and they hire developers to help them get that Salesforce automation tool to be exactly the way they want it to be. Not managed by IT, it's managed 100% within the business unit. Right? So we have business units that are doing the job that used to be done by IT. We have people in IT that continue to do that kind of work, but now we also have managed service providers. The number and size of managed service providers has tripled in the last 5 years. So we see a lot of the work that was traditionally done by IT departments is being outsourced into managed service providers. Sometimes it's being done by the IT department, but sometimes it's being done by a business unit who has bypassed the IT department to enter into that relationship. What we're seeing in organizations today is a very complex web of relationships between internal business units and external suppliers, whether those are tool vendors, cloud service providers, or managed service providers. It's a very complex web. What we're finding to manage this web, organizations are turning to ITIL, and they're getting a lot of success by doing that. 93% of them are using ITIL as a basis for managing those relationships, setting the right expectations, making sure that performance is correctly defined, measured, and delivered. The second last benefit, cybersecurity is still one of the top issues facing CIOs today. Now, you'll know that ITIL is not primarily a security management framework. There are a number of them out there, and some of you are, of course, working with them. I see a hand went up. I don't know where that came from, but you have a question, please log it in the Q&A. Otherwise, we'll address it at the end. But security management is a really important driver for CIOs today. The interesting thing is that organizations are actually using ITIL to make their security programs more successful. Why? Are the security programs not good enough on their own? Well, yes and no. Security management frameworks are certainly contain pretty much everything you need to secure your environment. But as you read through them, you'll begin to see statements being made or requirements that depend on technology being managed effectively. So, for example, we need to secure assets in the organization. What are those assets? Who manages them? How are they managed? Well, the security management department doesn't answer that question. That question is answered by the people who manage the technology. And the people who manage the technology are using ITIL to answer those kind of questions. So you'll see when nothing is in place, what we're seeing right now is that 17% there is a 17% increase in the number of security incidents where organizations are not using anything to manage their technology or no formal framework. However, in mature organizations, you're seeing 52% and 29% decrease in the number of security incidents, not by implementing a security management framework, but by implementing a better and more cohesive way of managing the technology environment. Sorry, just to go back to that. So let me be clear. I'm not saying you should not use a security management framework. You absolutely should. They're really important. But a key dependency of every security management framework is the ability to manage your technology environment effectively. And security management frameworks do not tell you how to do that. That is where we depend on frameworks like ITIL. And then finally, to attract and retain IT talent, this has become a major issue in the last few years, in the last 5 years especially, from two perspectives. One is we have an increasingly mobile workforce due to the pandemic and various other factors, increase in mobile technology, etc. But in addition to that, we have this host of emerging technology. So we need people who are skilled cloud architects, artificial intelligence experts, who understand every new piece of technology and type of architecture that is coming into our environment. And at the same time, we need to know, not only where to find them, but how to keep them in our organization, because we depend on them. And these skills could be scarce. So what ITIL does is it helps us to attract that IT talent because we're able to align the skills not only to a short-term need. Hey, we need somebody who knows AI. Great. They get AI into the organization, and then what? Do we even know how we're going to be using AI over the next 10 years? No, because we're still trying to learn what it is and how to use it today. So how do we make sure that if we're getting someone who understands AI into the organization, that we know exactly what that skill is going to be used for today and over the next 10 years, and how do we prepare that person and help them to develop their careers over the next 10 years to do what we need in our organization, but also to help them build a fulfilling and purposeful career for themselves. Notice again, the more mature we are, the more effectively we're able to attract and retain talent. What you find in less mature organizations is there's a lot of turnover simply because we don't fully understand why we need the skills we're asking for and what's going to happen to those skills over an extended period of time. Okay, so you can see there are a number of reasons why people are using ITIL. The reasons for using ITIL are very compelling. Now, let's have a look at why that is. And we're going to get into a little bit of the theory here. So what is in ITIL that makes it so special that enables us to achieve these kind of benefits? Well, first of all, many of you may know this. For those of you who don't, and for those of you who do, let me remind you, because we very often overlook this first fact. ITIL is a best practice. It's collected from thousands of organizations. So imagine you're sitting in your organization and something happens that you've never seen before. You get an error message, or you get some sort of incident that happens. And you pick up your phone and you speak to somebody you know in the industry, maybe a friend or a colleague, and you say, hey, I'm looking at this error message. What does that mean? And they give you an answer. Great. You've got the answer for your problem. You carry on with your work. Well, what happens then? Do you document that? Do you keep that for future reference? What happens the next time you find another problem that you need advice with? Do you have to keep picking up the phone and finding out somebody? What happens if the person you pick up the phone to doesn't know the answer to this? You then get forwarded to somebody else. So call so-and-so, they may know. Maybe you get onto LinkedIn and find somebody who seems to have that level of expertise. It can become extremely time-consuming and difficult to find the kind of answers that you're looking for. Well, what ITIL has done is it's done a lot of that work for you. Now, it doesn't look at any specific technologies, but what it does is it goes to organizations and says, how have you dealt with this kind of situation in your organization in the past? And it documents that. And it documents it not only in a haphazard way. So it doesn't just put a page in and say, well, here's a page on how to manage a change. okay, 3 years later, here's a change on how to manage a change if it's urgent, and it's kind of stuck on the end of the document. No, what ITIL does is it says, we're getting a lot of information that people needed to manage changes. And there were different ways of managing changes. Let's analyze all of those and let's put them all in the same place. And what emerges is something called change management, or as it's become now, change enablement. And it shows us what we've learned from all of those organizations. So it takes those learnings, it structures them, and then it documents them. So the really cool thing about a best practice is it doesn't matter where you start from. In fact, you probably want to start with the thing that you need to know first. So what are you having the biggest issues with? What are you having the biggest challenges with? What has your executive team told you is their most important priority? That's where you should start within ITIL. And because it's a best practice, you can be sure that what you're reading in there has come from somebody who's done it before, something that worked. It's used by organizations for a number of things. The most common one is digital and IT management. I'm including both of those because very often we separate them. We say, no, IT is different from digital. No, actually not. IT is a part of digital. Information technology is one component of digital technology. The other two components, by the way, are operational technology and communications technology. But what ITIL does is it focuses on all of those. And it says if you're managing a digital technology, whether it is traditional IT, whether it's some sort of communication, whether it is some sort of operation technology, all of it is involved, all of it is managed using similar approaches. So we use ITIL to do that. And then the other thing that ITIL helps us to do is to enable digital transformation. Now, it's not a digital transformation framework, but what it does is it shows all of the disciplines that are needed before, during, and after the transformation of your organization. And so many organizations have begun to use ITIL as a key building block of their digital transformation program. Let me give you an example of organizations that did not do this. So organization decides they need to do digital transformation. They've used ITIL in the past and they have a great service desk. And they certainly are able to do incident and problem management. They've got a good change management, a change advisory board going, and it's great. But they say the digital world is different. We are only going to look for tools and technologies that enable us to manage services in an automated fashion. We're not going to worry about ITIL for the new world. What they very soon discover is that the basic disciplines that were used for traditional IT management will continue to be used within a new digital environment. Changes will still continue to happen. Can you automate some of them? Absolutely, you can. But if you don't know what they are, how are you automating them effectively? So it's really important that we understand those disciplines as we transform the organization. They may look different in the digitally transformed organization than they did before, but the basic disciplines will still be the same. So organizations have begun to realize this, and they've begun to realize that as they moved into the cloud, the disciplines that they learned in ITIL are just as important in cloud environments as they are in non-cloud environments. Do they look exactly the same? No, they're a little bit different because we have a cloud service provider and we have us. They're a little bit different, but there's still change enablement, there's still incident management, there's still problem management, there is still digital strategy. All of these things still exist. The basic disciplines are still there. So organizations that are experienced, that are successful in enabling digital transformation, have very often turned to ITIL as a basis to fuel that transformative process. Individuals use ITIL to become certified, but they also use them to grow their careers. So we may find very often, typically, a person may start with a foundation course, they may proceed on and take one or two of the practice-based courses, let's say service desk or incident management course, and very soon find themselves interacting with customers in a different way and realize, hey, I need something more than this. I need a better way to interact with my customers. Oh, there's a few more components in ITIL that I need to learn. Maybe some service level management, maybe some business relationship management. And so I begin to expand my knowledge and my career. Now, how does ITIL work? So first thing to understand ITIL is to understand that ITIL is based on a very important premise. That is that we use technology for a purpose, and the purpose is more important than the technology itself. So, in other words, how do we use technology products to achieve important business objectives? This is an interesting question because there is still a theory out there that all you have to do is be very good at managing technology and the rest takes care of itself. I'm great. I'm not going to name any names. I have my cloud architecture certificate. Fantastic. I can manage cloud architecture. I know how to configure buckets in the cloud or containers in the cloud. Fantastic. I'm really good. I am a cloud expert. I know how to support an end user device. Fantastic. I'm really good at setting up and configuring and troubleshooting laptops. Wonderful. But what happens when all of that is working? What is it that you're actually supporting? And can you be sure that if you have fixed somebody's laptop, that they are able to achieve the purpose, the business purpose of the organization that you work for? Is that all that it takes? Just having a functional laptop? What else do they need? What else do you need to help them with? What else do you need to provide them? So the question there is not just how do we manage the technology? The question is, how do we use technology products so that we achieve business objectives? And that's the premise of ITIL. In other words, if you want to put it out there, technology products are used to provide services that achieve a business purpose. And for that reason, ITIL focuses on this term IT service management or just service management. Yes, it is involved in managing technology products because technology products and the quality of those products is really important. But once those products are in place, it all depends how they're going to be used and how they're going to be delivered and how they're going to be supported so that we can achieve a business purpose. And that's what ITIL focuses on. So what is service management? Well, here's the formal definition. It's the implementation and management of quality IT services to meet the needs of the business. In other words, it's making sure that when somebody uses technology, that it's doing exactly what it needs them to do to achieve that business purpose. That means to be a good service manager, we not only need to understand the technology, but we also have to understand the business purpose, and we also have to understand how the technology is used to achieve that business purpose. So effective service management means that we can help customers to use services, and by doing that, they produce successful strategic, tactical, and operational outcomes. In other words, they can get their job done and make the organization successful. Not only that, but we can do it in a way that is predictable, that is effective, and at the right level of quality for the amount of money that we have to invest in it. So that's how ITIL achieves these benefits. There's a problem, though, and I've already alluded to this. The problem is that many technology management approaches focused almost entirely on the technology itself. Hey, as long as you can build or buy great products, you don't have to worry about the rest. The rest takes care of itself. All you have to do is make sure they perform perfectly, right? So you've got a bunch of servers, virtual servers sitting in the cloud or a physical server farm, I don't know, but those servers are performing perfectly. Yes, but do they do what the business needs them to do? And so organizations we find today, especially with all the new technology that's coming along, are investing heavily in technical training. We see a lot of cloud architecture training, a lot of end user support training. We see a lot of AI and machine learning type training, RPA, robotic and process automation training that's happening out there. We see a lot of that. But how much of that is actually focused on, hey, how do you define what the purpose of the business is and make sure that that technology, when it's working effectively, is meeting that business purpose? That is what's missing in many of these training programs. So the result is often that we have a high-performing technology group in their mind anyway, and they have the paper to prove it. Hey, look, we have these great levels of performance, but they're not consistently meeting expectations of their business organization. And worse than that, very often, they're not meeting the long-term strategy of the organization. Yes, they're able to get projects done in record time. Yes, they're able to get functionality to users quickly as you can think. But are they actually moving the business closer to where it needs to be? Here's an example of this. This is value. So value says what you get has to be greater than what you spend, right? So what do we spend and what do we get? Well, what we get, this is what the business wants, right? Our organization, executive leadership wants increased revenue, greater market share, better customer loyalty, sustainability, new markets, new products, lower operating costs, and improved productivity. That's what they want. What do we spend money on in IT? New or updated technology, optimized system performance, process improvement, faster break fix, better service desk, making changes, training, compliance, and moving to the cloud. Now, question is, where do most of your IT projects focus? Do they focus on the right-hand side, the blue box, or do they focus on achieving what's in the green box? It's really important for IT to really achieve these long-term benefits that we spoke about earlier in the webinar, that you need to link. I know we have to do the things that are in the blue box, but we have to learn how to link them so that we can demonstrate that what is being spent is achieving what's in the green box. So when you update the technology, have you helped to increase revenue? Have you increased market share? Have you increased customer loyalty? If you cannot answer those questions, you're always going to be seen as a money-spending organization. Now, if you're a money-spending organization, there's only one type of value that you can offer, and that is to reduce the amount of money that you spend. So we find a lot of IT departments in a situation that come the end of the year and it's budget planning time, there's only one thing they're asked to do: cut your budget. You spent this much last year, we need you to spend 5% less next year. That's not where we should be. We add value. We fuel the organization's success. Well, we need to learn how to prove it. And the only way you can do that is to be able to map the things that you do in IT to the things that happen in the business environment. And that's what service management is about. It's about making those connections. It's about showing how the things that we do build the value of the organization. If all we're doing is focusing on managing technology, then the only thing we'll focus on is what's in the blue box. And if we do that, we'll find our budget being cut year after year after year. Okay, so how does ITIL help us do this? Well, what ITIL does, it doesn't just focus on the technology. What it does, it helps us to focus on all of the aspects involved in how technology is managed and used. It looks at people. It looks at the information that is used, as well as the tools and the technology. It looks at the value streams and the process. In other words, what are the activities in the organization that we support, and how do we support those? It looks at the partners that we work with. Not only that, but it looks at all of those dimensions in the context of what's happening in the world around us. So we're not just thinking of, well, what does my manager tell me I have to do? We're also thinking, yes, this is what my manager's job is. This is what's important to him or her. But this is why. And this is how that's going to change over the next 5 years. So I'd better start getting prepared for that. I'd better start learning how my job is going to change, how my technology that I'm managing is going to change, how the skills that I need to develop need to change. And so ITIL really helps us to move from where we are today into what we're going to need to do in the future. Within or with at the base of these 4 dimensions of service management, we have the actual practice. This is the meat of ITIL. This is where the description of all of the activities that we need to do, all of the people we need to invest in, all of the kind of technologies that we use, all of the kind of partners that we work with. This is where it all comes together and shows us exactly what we need to be doing. There are 34 practices in ITIL. I'm not going to cover them all today. You'll be relieved to know. But each of them has a role to play in building a successful technology organization. So just to sum up, why ITIL? Why now? Well, because services drive value, and the way in which organizations achieve value is changing. It's new technology. There's new ways of doing business. We need to equip the organization to be able to do that. Digital transformation is creating new business models. We, as technology specialists and as service specialists, need to help the organization understand how to make those come alive, how to innovate, how to grow. ITIL4 really helps us to do this. It incorporates modern developments. It is not stuck in the past. It actually has kept track with digital transformation initiatives. It's kept track with how cloud has changed the organization, and has kept track and is keeping track with the emerging technology as it emerges, including things like AI. So this enables us to, ITIL enables us, gives us tools that we can use to help the business stay relevant and sustainable within a changing industry. Great. So how do you get started? Here's some suggestions. This is the whole framework. I'm not going to go through every one of these, but just to give you an idea of how broad and how deep this the ITIL framework is. You'll notice I mentioned there are a number of practices. A lot of people get started by taking an ITIL foundation course and then seeing where they want to go. You can go in one of 3 directions. You can really focus in on the detail of the practices and learn exactly what's inside those practices and how they work. Or you can look at developing a career, more sort of coordinating a number of different practices and how they contribute to the business and become a managing professional. Or you may want to focus on the strategy of the organization and how it's going to meet the new challenges of emerging technologies and changing business models. Whichever way you want to go, there is a career path for you. Some people like to go all 3. They want the big picture. They want to know strategy, they want to know management, and they want to know the individual practices in detail. And if you do all 3 of these, then you automatically qualify as an ITIL master. There are other extension modules for those who are interested. There is an extension module around cloud services. There is an extension module about sustainability, which is becoming an increasingly important item on most organizations' agenda. Business relationship management and IT asset management. There is specific guidance for people in those who want to focus more on those areas. So pick one, anyone, to get you started. If you haven't done your foundation yet, it's a good place to start. And then choose, do you want to know more of the detail, or do you want to start with the bigger picture and work your way across? What you could also do is sign up for this group called MyAxilos. Now, Axilos is the company that owned ITIL. Axilos was acquired by PeopleCert. But the brand name of MyAxilos still exists. It is still a portal that is available for members. It has a low cost per year. It's a subscription-based model. But when you join my Axelos, you're able to register for continuing development. You're able to get templates. You're able to attend webinars, to get more details from other people in the industry. You're able to get white papers that can help you in your current position. Another thing you may want to do is, if you're not sure and you want your organization to figure out where to focus the most attention, you could use the ITIL maturity model. This exists. You can get access to this either through looking at the practice guides for those practices that you're most interested in. They have information about it there. Or you can commission a maturity assessment from a consulting partner. And coming soon, this used to be the case, and then it was put on hold for a while, but we're bringing it back. Soon you'll be able to get onto Amazon and buy an ITIL book and read that book yourself. So those will be available soon. Today, of course, you can get hold of the books. Anybody who takes a course through PeopleCert will get an e-copy of the book that they're studying. So you will have access to that. And you can also buy these books on the PeopleCert website. But if you're wanting to buy books, I would certainly hold out a little bit. They'll be available on Amazon soon. Now, questions. I see 2 questions in the chat. Great. Oh, it's one question. Mark, thank you very much for the question. You're certified in ITIL4, and it's a foundation certificate, current process for upgrading. The quickest and easiest way is simply to register and take the ITIL4 foundation class. It is quite different to ITIL version 3. There's a lot of similarity. One is built on top of the other. But there are some new concepts and new ways of looking at old concepts in ITIL4. So I think my recommendation, Mark, is go ahead and take that ITIL foundation class. It's the quickest and easiest way to do it. And thank you very much for your time.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.